How to Talk to Anyone, Audiobook Series Part 5. Let's begin. Part 8. How to Work a Party Like a Politician Works a Room the Politician's 6-point party checklist. Most of us, when invited to a party, waft into a fluffy thought process. Our random reverie goes something like this. This could be fun. Wonder if they're going to serve food. Hope it's good. Might be some interesting people there. Wonder if my friend so-and-so is coming. Golly, what should I wear? That's not the way a politician thinks about a party, however. While politicians, heavy-duty networkers, serious socializers, and big winners in the business world are staring at the invitation, they instinctively surf to a different channel. Before they RSVP with yes or no, their brains craft journalistic campaign questions. It's the 6-point party checklist. Who, when, what, why, where, and how. Let's take them one by one. Who is going to be at the party? More specifically, who will be there that I should meet? Serious networkers calculate, who must I meet for business? Who should I meet for political or social reasons? And, if single and searching, who do I want to meet for possible love? If they don't know who is going to be in attendance, they ask. Politicians unabashedly telephone the host or hostess of the party and ask, who's coming? As the party giver chats casually about the guest list, politicians scribble the names of the people who interest them, then resolve to meet each. When should I arrive? Politicians do not leave arrival time to whenever they finish getting dressed. They don't ask themselves, should I be fashionably late? They carefully calculate their estimated time of arrival and estimated time of departure. If the party is bulging with contacts, biggies get there early to start hitting their marks as each arrives. VIPs frequently come early to get their business done before party regulars, who hate to be the first one, they start arriving. They are never embarrassed to arrive early. After all, the only people who see them are other early arrivals, who are often heavy hitters like themselves. Nor will you find politicians prowling around the last to slink out the door. Once they've accomplished what they set out to do, they're on their way to the next opportunity. If their agenda is more social, they try to leave their departure time open, and their pre-party schedule free. That way, if they make an important new contact, they can stay around and talk with him, or drive her home, or go somewhere else for coffee. What should I take with me? A politician's checklist is not the usual, let's see, my comb, cologne, and breath mints. They pack more functional networking tools in their pockets or purses. If corporate cats will be prowling the party, they pack a pocketful of business cards. If it's a gala where people are gadding about on the social ladder and they want to exude old world elegance, they grab a handful of social cards containing only their name and possibly an address and phone number. Some feel giving out a business card in a purely social setting can be gauche. The most vital tool in their party pack is a small pad and pen to keep track of important contacts. Why is the party being given? The politician's perpetual philosophy of penetrate the ostensible enters here. That's just a fancy way of saying a look under the rug. They ask themselves, what is the ostensible reason for the party? A big industrialist is giving his daughter a graduation party. A newly divorced executive is throwing himself a birthday bash. A floundering business is celebrating its 10th year. Nice. Politicians say to themselves, that's the ostensible. But what's the real reason for the party? Maybe the industrialist wants to get his daughter a good job, so he's invited dozens of potential employers. The birthday boy is single again, so the guest list is heavy with attractive and accomplished females. The business desperately needs good PR if it's going to stay around another 10 years. So they've invited the press and community makers and shakers. Politicians have expert under rug vision to spot the host's real agenda. They will, of course, never discuss it at the party. However, the insight elevates them to a shared state of higher consciousness with other heavy hitters at the bash. Their knowledge also makes them valuable agents for the party giver. A savvy politician introduces the job seeking daughter to some executives at the party, or tells the most alluring women at the bash what a great guy birthday boy is. When chatting with reporters, he talks up the host's business that needs good PR. When people support the real why of the party, they become popular and sought after guests for future events. Where is the collective mind? Often people from one profession or one interest group will comprise most of the guest list. A politician never accepts any invitation without asking herself what kind of people will be at this party and what will they be thinking about. Perhaps there will be a drove of doctors. So she clicks on the latest medical headlines and rehearses a little doc talk. If the guests are a nest of new age voters, the politician gets up to speed on telepathic healing, tantric toning, and trance dancing. Politicians can't afford to not be in the know. How am I going to follow up? On the party. Now, the big finale, I call it contact cement. It's cementing the contacts the politician has made. After meeting a good contact and exchanging cards, practically everyone says, "It's been great talking to you. We'll stay in touch." This good intention seldom happens. Without Herculean effort, politicians, however, make a science out of keeping up the contact. After the party, they sit at their desks and, like a game of solitaire, lay out the business cards of the people they've met. Using the business card dossier technique, described later in this section, they decide how, when, and if to deal with each. Does this person require a phone call? Should that one receive a handwritten note? Shall I email or call the other one? Use the 6-point party checklist, the who, when, why, where, what, and how of a party as your general game plan. Now let's get down to specifics. Munching or mingling. How come people don't approach me? The average partygoer, let's say Charlie, arrives at the bash. He makes a beeline for the refreshment table for munchies and a beverage. He then finds a few buddies and starts chatting away with them. Chewing the nibbles on his plate and the fat with his friends, he occasionally looks around the room to see who might be new and fun to talk to. He's hoping several attractive and interesting people at the party will spot him and come over to talk. What's wrong with Charlie's approach? Everything if Charlie wants to make the party productive. Let's start with the average partygoer's first mistake, getting some refreshments and a drink right off the bat. People mingling at a party make judgments, often subconscious, about whom they are going to approach. Have you ever lived on a farm or had a dog or a cat? Then you know you never disturb animals when they are eating. Likewise, when a human animal is eating, other human animals do not feel comfortable advancing. If partygoers' eyes scan the crowd and see you with the feed bag on, they pass right over you. Subconsciously, they're saying to themselves, "Let the hungry hound chow down, and maybe we'll talk later." Later never comes because they wind up making friends with someone else whose mouth wasn't full. Politicians always eat before they come to the party. They know they'd need a circus juggler's talent to shake hands, exchange business cards, hold a drink, and stuff crackers and cheese into their mouths, all with just 2 hands. Technique 71. Munching or mingling. Politicians want to be eyeball to eyeball and belly to belly with their constituents. Like any big winner well versed in the science of proxemics and spatial relationships, they know any object except their belt buckles has the effect of a brick wall between two people. Therefore, they never hold food or drink at a party. Come to munch or come to mingle, but do not expect to do both. Like a good politician, chow down before you come. Rubberneck the room. How to make an unforgettable entrance. Loretta Young makes television history when she appears at the head of her immense staircase and surveys the set. Then she swoops down to start the show. The Pope steps out onto his balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square in Rome and surveys the crowd. Then he begins the benediction. Betty Davis stops in the doorway and looks around. Then she mutters, "What a dump!" And every late-night TV comic, since Here's Johnny, steps center stage and scrutinizes the applauding audience. Then he reveals the reason for the smirk on his face. What do all these great entrances have in common? Each pauses momentarily and looks round before swooping into decisive action. Movie directors love shots of the doorway where the camera pans, the music swells, and all eyes gravitate to the honcho or honchoette standing under the frame. Does the star skulk into the room like a frightened little kitten in a new owner's home? Or, like many of us do at a party, frantically gravitate to the first familiar face so people won't think he or she's unconnected? No, the star stops. Then, framed by the doorway, his or her notable presence is felt by all. People who have mastered this trick have what envious theatrical wannabes call stage presence. Stage groupies think some lucky stars are born with it. Think again, thespians. It's cultivated. Politicians don't just slink unnoticed into a room full of people. Politicians make the entrance. With one simple technique, you too can make great entrances. I call it rubberneck the room. Before entering, stop dramatically in the doorway and survey the scene LOULE with your eyes. It is significant that while you're standing in the doorway, you're not thinking, "Look at me." The reason you're rubbernecking the room is not to show off. It is so you can diagnose the situation you're walking into. Take note of the lighting, the bar, and most important, the faces. Listen to the music, the buzz of the crowd, the clinking of glasses. See who is talking to whom. While rubbernecking, you'll also be using Be the Chooser, not the Choosy, the next technique, which helps you select your first, second, and maybe third target. Now, like the big cat who rules the jungle, leap in to make your first move toward wiping up the room. Technique 72. Rubberneck the room. When you arrive at the gathering, stop dramatically in the doorway. Then SLOLE survey the situation. Let your eyes travel back and forth like a SWAT team ready in a heartbeat to wipe out anything that moves. In tandem with rubberneck the room, try using the following technique. Be the chooser, not the choosy. Any interesting strangers I should meet? Politicians don't wait for others to approach them. If the party host or their campaign manager has not supplied a must-meet list, they choose their targets while rubbernecking the room. As their keen eyes scan the crowd, they're asking themselves, who would I most enjoy talking to? Who looks like they could be most beneficial to my life? Who could I learn most from in this gang? How do they choose? They look at everyone the same way my friend Bob, the caricature artist, looks at people. You can tell a whole lot more than you realize if you keep your gaze fixed on someone. Every twinkle in someone's eye and every line surrounding it tells a story. The story of the life he or she leads. Who was it who said at age 30, "Everyone has the face he deserves"? Yet few of us consciously look into strangers' eyes. How foolish that, at a party or convention, for making contacts, most people are embarrassed to make eye contact with people we don't know. In my networking seminar, I prime participants to make intense visual contact by asking them to form a big circle, walk around the room, and silently stare at each other. Gaze into each other's eyes, I tell them. Examine each other's movements. As they are walking, I say, the most important business contact, the dearest friend, or the love of your life is probably not in this room. Nevertheless, sometime soon, you will be in a room where you will spot someone you sense could change your life. I want you to be prepared. I want you to have the courage to make the approach and not wait in vain for that special someone to approach you. While strolling and staring, I ask them to silently choose the 4 people they most want to talk to during the break. Only the beautiful people will be chosen. When given this unfamiliar and uncomfortable assignment, the participants assume everyone will make a beeline for the most attractive people. It never happens. Something mystical occurs when people take the time to really look at each other. Everyone discovers a distinctive beauty in one or two other people that is very personal, very special, and speaks uniquely to the seeker. The dearest friend in my life was a homely little fellow named Chip. He was only 5, 2 boy. Chip had a huge nose and funny little eyes peeping out through thick glasses. At a party, without using this technique, I probably would never have noticed Chip. However, my concentration was on him the day we met because he was giving a speech. When I gazed intently into his eyes and watched his lips moving, I saw such subjective beauty coming from his face. He became my best friend for 12 years until a tragic disease took his life. Nevertheless, Chip remained beautiful to me until the end because no matter how twisted his body became with illness, the beauty shone through his spirit. As the seminar participants explore each other's faces and movements, they discover the subjective beauty in their faces, in their spirits. No one can explain why one person chooses another as one of his or her special 4. Yet practically everyone returns from the break having made a new good friend. Never is anyone left unchosen. When you seek people's special qualities by exploring their faces, you will find them. If you want to walk out of any gathering with your life enhanced, spend time with people you choose, not just those who choose you. Be choosy in who you pick, but don't wait to be the choosy. Technique 73. Be the chooser, not the choosy. The lifelong friend, the love of your life, or the business contact who will transform your future may not be at the party. However, someday, somewhere, he or she will be. Make every party a rehearsal for the big event. Do not stand around waiting for the moment when that special person approaches you. You make it happen by exploring every face in the room. No more ships passing in the night. Capture whatever or whomever you want in your life. Sure, in a seminar, it's easy. But what about real life? Sometimes, after the break, a participant will say, "It was simple to go up to people I wanted to talk to this time because you gave it as an assignment." But what about at a real party? Recently, one of my participants named Todd asked me this question in front of the group. I asked, "Todd, how did you make the approach this time?" "Well, I just went up and said, 'Hi, I'm Todd. I wanted to talk to you.'" "Well?" I asked. It dawned on him that he could use this opening phrase to meet anyone at any party. To smooth the potentially awkward moment, you quickly follow up with an innocuous question like, "How do you know the hostess?" Or, "Do you live in the area?" Now you're off and running just as though the host had introduced you. Of course, other choosy people will be prowling around the party. Some of them, after scrutinizing you, will decide you are one of the special people they choose to talk to. The following is a subliminal maneuver to make it easy for them. Come over to confirm they made a wise choice. Come hither, hands. Your body can beckon, "Come on over," or growl, "Go away." Have you ever noticed how comfortable you feel sauntering into certain rooms? The chairs are arranged in a way that welcomes you, as if saying, "Come right on in and sit on me." Conversely, you enter other rooms where you must navigate a circuitous route around tables and dressers before you finally find a free chair. Likewise, some people arrange their body furniture, their arms and legs to say, "Hey, come right on over and talk to me." Yet other people's body furniture shouts, "Keep out, approach at your own risk." Shy people inadvertently say, "Stay away," when they fold their arms. They give off insecure signals by clutching a purse, clasping a drink, or smoking a cigarette. Controlled studies show that partygoers are more comfortable approaching people who stand with an open body, arms uncrossed and hanging at their sides, legs slightly separated, a slight smile on their faces. Any object between you and the crowd is a subliminal cut off, even your purse. More people approach a woman who sports a shoulder bag than one squeezing the handbag. The shoulder bag hangs behind her back, thus leaving the path to talk to her open. Give them the old wrist flash. Now here's the piece de resistance. Next to your face, your wrist and palms are one of the most expressive parts of your body. Palms up speak volumes of good sentiments. The Pope's wrist and palms are up when he beckons, "Come unto me, my brethren." The burglar's wrist and palms are up when he says, "I give up, don't shoot." The innocent man's wrists and palms are up when he's saying, "I don't know who took the money." Vulnerable, open palms signify, "I have nothing to hide." They also signify acceptance. When you are listening to a business colleague to whom you want to signal acceptance, make sure your wrist and palms are up. Even if you're resting your head on your chin, turn your wrist forward. Whenever you are chatting with anyone, give yourself a constant hand check. Make sure you don't point your knuckles directly toward anyone. Let them have the pleasure of seeing the soft, tender, come hither skin of your wrist and palms, not the wrinkled go away hide on your knuckles. Romance on your mind? Ladies, let your hands do some talking for you. Women instinctively turn their wrist and palms upward when a man excites them. In fact, the old wrist flash, while talking with males subconsciously, gives them a sexy jolt. Technique 74. Come hither hands. Be a human magnet, not a human repellent. When standing at a gathering, arrange your body in an open position, especially your arms and hands. People instinctively gravitate toward open palms and wrists seductively arranged in the come hither position. They shy away from knuckles in the get lost or I'll punch you position. Use your wrist and palms to say, "I have nothing to hide." "I accept you and what you're saying," or "I find you sexy." Pave a clear path for people who find you special. Frightened little jungle cats crouch behind rocks and logs so no bigger animals will spot them. In the social jungle, shy people do the same. They instinctively seek out corners and sit in seats where they won't be seen, whereas lynxes and lions stroll confidently to the center of the jungle clearing. Human big cats in the social jungle also stand confidently in a clearing so others can see them. Like a politician, position yourself near a doorway since everyone must pass your way at some point in the evening. Now we come to a technique all politicians use. In fact, some political pundits have credited the election of both John Kennedy and Bill Clinton to their mastery of the technique I call tracking. Tracking make them feel like an old-time movie star. In the 1940s, movies were different. Before experimental films, cinema verite and nouvelle vague, they had stories. Americans hopped in their Buicks, a foxtail tied to the radio antenna and baby boots suspended from the rearview mirror, drove to the movie house and watched a story unfold before them. Almost invariably, The hero and heroine in the silver screen would meet, fall in love, overcome seemingly impossible obstacles, get married, and presumably live happily after. Oh, the stories varied slightly. But there was always a leading man and maybe a leading woman. Then there was the rest of the world. The supporting characters could live or die without much brouhaha. But every minor event in the star's life was significant. Well, movies may have changed. Human nature hasn't. Everyone feels like the star of a 1940s movie. Every trivial event in their lives is momentous. There's me. Then there's the rest of the world. What someone had for breakfast, what shoes he chose to wear, and whether he took time to floss his teeth can be more important to that particular someone than the fall of faraway nations or the rise of global temperatures. Husbands and wives sometimes share their spouse's minutiae. What did you have for breakfast, honey? You didn't wear those shoes, did you? Did you remember to floss? To create an interesting intimacy, big winners make a point to remember minute details of important contacts' lives. They obviously don't feign interest in what they had for breakfast or whether they flossed or forgot. But to make someone feel like a big star, they remember details the contact does happen to share. Take their lead. If a prospect mentions he had Rice Krispies for breakfast, allude to it later. If in chatting, your boss tells you she wore uncomfortable shoes to work one day, find a way to refer to it on another. If your client mentions he's a resolute flosser, compliment him at a later date on his discipline. It hints he or she is a memorable star in the galaxy of people you've met. It's called tracking their lives. When you track their minutiae, you make them feel like 1940s movie stars, and that minor events in their lives are major concerns in yours. Don't leave it to chance. Politicians make a science out of tracking. They keep a little black box either on their desk, in their computer, or in their brain of the last concern, enthusiasm, or event discussed with everyone in their life. They keep track of where the people were, what they said, and what they were doing since the last conversation. Then the first words of the next phone call or meeting with that person relates to it, that information. Hello, Joe. How was your trip to Jamaica? Hey, Sam. Did your kid make the baseball team? Hi, Sally. Have you heard back from your client yet? Nice to hear from you, Bob. It means you survived that Sichuan restaurant you were going to last time we spoke. When you invoke the last major or minor event in anyone's life, it confirms what they've known all along. They're the most important person in the world. One of the most powerful forms of tracking is remembering anniversaries of people's personal achievements. Did your boss get promoted to her present position 1 year ago today? Did your client go public? How much more memorable than a birthday card to send a 1-year congratulations note? Remembering people's private passions is another. Several years ago, I wrote regularly for a magazine. My then editor, Kerry, was obsessed with her new kitten named Cookie. Recently, I ran into Kerry at a writers' conference. In early conversation, I said to her, I guess Cookie is a full-grown cat by now. How is she? Carrie's astonished smile was my reward. Leil, she squealed, I can't believe you remember Cookie. Yes, she's fine now. And Carrie went on for another 10 minutes about Cookie, the now full-grown cat. Technique 75. Tracking like an air traffic controller, track the tiniest details of your conversation partner's lives. Refer to them in your conversation like a major news story. It creates a powerful sense of intimacy. When you invoke the last major or minor event in anyone's life, it confirms the deep conviction that he or she is an old-style hero around whom the world revolves. And people love you for recognizing their stardom. A week later, I got a call from Carrie asking me if I'd do a big story for her magazine. Did she think of me because I used the tracking technique and remembered Cookie? Nobody can say, but I have my suspicions. I've seen the tracking technique work on too many people to assume the rewards are coincidental. How do politicians remember so many facts to track about so many people? They use the following technique: the business card dossier. How did you remember that? Several years ago, I attended a political fundraising event in a Midwestern state. One guest intrigued me. Sometimes I'd see him in animated conversation with several people. Other times, he'd be standing alone, scribbling something on a card in his hand. Then the next time I'd look up, he'd be chatting it up with someone else. The next minute, he'd be scribbling in his hand again. He repeated this pattern for over an hour. I became as curious as a nosy neighbor. Who was this fellow? At one point, during the evening, I was standing alone by the refreshment table. He came up to me with a big smile, a warm handshake, and introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Joe Smith." He asked me what I was drinking. I told him white wine and we started discussing preferences. I happened to mention my favorite white was Sancerre. While we talked, I had to bite my tongue to resist asking him what he'd been up to with the feverish note-taking. A few minutes later, I spotted a friend across the room and excused myself. He asked for my card, and as I walked away, I peeked over my shoulder. I knew it. There he was, scribbling on my card. That was my opening. I turned back and, trying to pass my inquiry off as a joke, said, "Hey, I didn't give you my measurements. What's that you're writing?" He gave a hearty laugh at my tasteless joke and said, "You caught me." He turned over my card and I saw one word written on it: Sancerre. Then, to assuage my paranoia, he emptied his pocket full of people's business cards to show me scribbles on the back of each. I assumed it was just Joe's little system to help him remember people. It wasn't until months later that I saw the method to his madness. One morning, I went to my mailbox and found a personal postcard from Joe. He told me he was running for state senator. Then at the bottom of the card, he'd written, "Had any good Sancerre lately?" That won my heart. Had I lived in his state, a little touch like that might have swayed my vote to him. Technique 76. The business card dossier. Right after you've talked to someone at a party, take out your pen. On the back of his or her business card, write notes to remind you of the conversation, his favorite restaurant, sport, film, or drink, whom she admires, where she grew up, a high school honor, or maybe a joke he told. In your next communication, toss off a reference to the favorite restaurant, film, movie, drink, hometown, high school prize, or reprieve the laugh over the great joke. They may not jump up and down asking, "How did you remember that?" Nevertheless, they will remember you. No matter how important the VIP, he or she senses a special kinship with the person who refers to other than their usual well-known accomplishments. Politicians are constantly selling themselves. If you've ever wondered why America is called the land of promise, just keep your ears open in election year. But of course, to know what to promise people, politicians use the next super sales technique called eyeball selling. Eyeball selling. Keep your eyes open to see every word they don't say. The percentage of sales that Jimmy, a good friend of mine, makes is not to be believed. Even his sales manager doesn't know how he does it. But I do, because he told me. Jimmy says the fancy sales techniques he's learned over the years: benefit selling, partnering, selling to personality types, value-added concept, rejection proofing, spin selling, all pale next to what he calls eyeball selling. Eyeball selling is not memorizing 24 closing techniques, nor is it verbally sparring with the customer to overcome objections. Jimmy says it's quite simply keeping his eyes open, watching his customers' reactions, and adjusting his sales pitch according to how his customer's body moves. While Jimmy is giving his sales pitch, he's concentrating more on how his customer fidgets, twitches, and squirms than on what he's saying. He's scrutinizing his customer's involuntary head movements. He's studying her hand gestures, her body rotation, her facial expressions, even her eye fluctuations. Jimmy says when his customer is not saying a word, even if she's trying to give you a poker face, she cannot not communicate. She may not say in words how receptive she is to your pitch, but she's clearly telling you nonetheless. Jimmy says knowing what turns a prospect on, what turns her off, and what leaves her neutral from moment to moment can make or break the sale. How Jimmy finds out where the buck stops. The product Jimmy sells is expensive lighting equipment. Often he must make sales presentations to groups of 10, 20, or more people, he says. The first challenge in eyeball selling is discovering who the real decision maker is. Jimmy meets his challenge in an unorthodox, not necessarily recommended way. Right after good afternoon, gentlemen and ladies, he says something slightly confusing. Why? Because the surprised group doesn't know how to react. So their heads all twirl like weather vanes on a windy day to look at guess who, the honcho, the heavyweight, the headman or woman. Now Jimmy's got his decision maker so he can continue eyeball selling to that person. What to do when you get your cue? Some signals are obvious. Jimmy says. People shrug their shoulders for indifference, tap their fingers for impatience, or loosen their collar when they feel uncomfortable. But there are hundreds of other unconscious gestures I keep my antennae tuned for. For example, I watch the exact angle of my prospect's head position. If it's fully facing me, especially if it's cocked at a cute little angle, it means they're interested. In that case, I keep right on talking. But if their head is slightly turning away, that's a bad sign. I take it as a cue to change the subject and maybe talk about a different benefit of my product. Jimmy not only tailors what he's saying to his customers' reactions, he actively takes steps to change his prospect's body position if he feels it's not receptive. He says, the body must be open before the mind can follow. For example, he continues, if your customer has his arms crossed in front of his chest, hand him something to look at, so he has to unfold them to take it from you. Jimmy always carries a briefcase full of props to break down the barriers. He has photos of his wife and kids to hand married prospects, snapshots of his Skye Terrier for customers that have a dog, an antique watch to show antique lovers, and a pocket-sized computer to show gadget fanatics. Jimmy says, as long as I can get them to open their arms to reach for something, I have a shot at their minds. Jimmy also paces the timing of his pitch to match his customers' covert reactions. When his client reaches for an object, he takes it as a cue to talk slower or just be quiet. Reaching for a paperclip or fondling a folder on the desk says, I'm thinking about it. Of course, Jimmy is on constant lookout for sales-ready signals like picking up the contract, fondling the pen, or turning their palms up. At that point, he cuts quickly to the close. Another cue to bring out the contract signing pen is when your prospect's head starts bobbing up and down like a plastic duck. They're silently screaming, yes, I'll buy. Unskilled salespeople just keep on talking until they finish the pitch they learned in training. Many keep talking so long they unsell themselves. Conversely, when customers move their heads back and forth, no matter what they are saying, they mean no. Eyeballing is not for selling only without a word. Your friends and loved ones also show their wishes. When my friend Deborah became engaged to Tony, it seemed obvious to everyone, except Deborah, that it was not a marriage made in heaven. A few months before their wedding, I said, "Deb, are you really sure Tony is the one for you?" "Oh, yes," she said, her head moving right and left, back and forth. "I love him very much." That marriage never took place. Her body recognized what her mind hadn't yet realized. Like a politician, think of your social conversations as sales pitches. Even if you have no product, you want them to buy your ideas. If your listener turns away while you're talking, don't concentrate on how rude the person is. Like a sales pro, ask yourself, how can I change the subject to turn this person on? If their whole body starts to turn away, use the time honored personal question ploy. Ask about their favorite topic. "George, how big did you say that bass you caught last week was?" Or use his name and ask a personal question. That's always a grabber. "Archibald, what did you say the name of your high school football team was?" We've talked about only a few responses. Hints for reading someone's body language could fill a book. In fact, they have many of them. I suggest a few of my favorites in the references. 21, 26. Read up on body language and tune in to its visual channel. Whenever you're trying to sell to people, get their vote, or convince them you're the best candidate for the job or the role of life partner. Wouldn't it be super to have Jimmy's success rate with our listeners accepting whatever we say? We can if we just keep our eyes open. Technique 77. Eyeball selling. The human body is a 24-hour broadcasting station that transmits, "You thrill me. You bore me. I love that aspect of your product. That one puts my feet to sleep." Set the hidden cameras behind your eyeballs to pick up on all your customers' and friends' signals. Then plan your pitch and your pace accordingly. A quick review. That's all there is to it. You'll remember to eat before coming to the party, the munching or mingling technique, to leave your hands free for heavy networking. When you arrive, you'll stop in the doorway and rubberneck the room to get the lay of the land. While rubbernecking, you'll be the chooser, not the choosy, and pick your prospects for the evening. When standing around, your hands will be relaxing in the inviting come hither position. You haven't forgotten, of course, to use the meeting people techniques from previous chapters. If you spot someone you want to talk to, check them out for a "what's it" you can comment on. Finding none, just ask the party giver, "Who's at?" If the host or hostess is not in sight, simply stand near your target and resort to the eavesdrop-in technique. While chatting with anyone you've previously met, you will, of course, use tracking to win their vote or heart and all the techniques in part 2 to assure the conversation is interesting for your new acquaintance. Finally, you'll employ eyeball selling to make sure you're on target with every conversation. And don't forget, as you say so long, to scribble material for your next contact on your business card dossier. It's a good feeling when you've done it all right. Continue using these techniques politicians use to work a room, and you'll suffer no more unimportant parties. And following the advice throughout the book, you'll never strike anyone as an unimportant person. Now we move on to the advanced section of how to talk to anyone. Some of the following techniques may make you scratch your head in confusion. Pay special attention to the ones that do, because it means sometime, you might find yourself scratching your head over something much more painful, like the bump from hitting a glass ceiling, or why the business deal, friendship, or love affair went sour. You might never know, unless you read it here, that it was your own communications fumble. Part 9. Little tricks of big winners. The most treacherous glass ceiling of all. Every week when I was a kid, my mother took me to the National Geographic Society to see a film. The one on tigers invades my nightmares these many years later. Sitting there in the darkened theatre, I watched a mother give birth to 3 tiny cubs. One was born with a mangled leg. I witnessed how all the other tiger cubs excluded him. And right there in front of the cameras, he was tortured to death by the others. I remember crying and thinking how the healthy cubs were like a few of the kids in my school. Sometimes they could be very cruel. My best friend in high school was named Stella. Stella was a beautiful girl inside and out, but she had a speech defect, a cleft palate, and many of our classmates laughed at her behind her back and excluded her from their games. Kids haven't changed much. When I give talks for colleges and young people's groups, the discussion often turns to popularity. Everyone wants to be liked. Occasionally, students tell me stories about how some girl has a minor physical defect, say a crossed eye or a nervous twitch. They say some kids laugh and make fun of her. Or a boy has a limp, so no one chooses him for their baseball team. Even if he can run just as fast as the other kids, some of his classmates don't like image of a cripple being on their side. The years go by and kids become adults. Not too much changes. Adults are not as cruel, happily, about physical disabilities. But they can be brutal about social disabilities. Social disabilities are insidious because often we don't recognize them in ourselves. We can be blind to our social handicaps and deaf to our verbal deficiencies, but we are quick to recognize them in others. How many times has one of your associates made a dumb, insensitive gaffe? How often have you written somebody off because of some stupid move? Do you think he knew what he was doing? Of course not. He had no idea he was crossing a line or stepping on your toes. Probably no one ever told him about the subtleties we are going to discuss in this final section of how to talk to anyone. We've all heard about the glass ceiling some companies construct over women and minorities. People seldom discuss another kind of glass ceiling. This one is even more treacherous because you can't legislate against it and only top communicators recognize it. Yet it's a rock-hard shield. Many bright individuals hit their heads on the thick glass as they try to climb up the next rung of the ladder to join the big boys and girls on top. The folks able to crash through are the ones who abide by the unspoken rules that follow. Consider each of the following techniques. If you find any of them obvious, give yourself a pat on the back. It means you're already a tiger on that one. Be on the lookout for those communication sensitivities where you find yourself saying, "You gotta be kidding. What's wrong with that?" Watch out. It means someday, somewhere, you might commit that particular insensitivity. Then when a big winner responds coolly to your suggestion, doesn't return your phone call, doesn't give you the promotion, doesn't invite you to the party, doesn't accept your date, you'll never know what happened. Read each of the following techniques to assure you're not making any of these subtle mistakes that let the big players lacerate you and keep you from getting what you want in life. See no bloopers, hear no bloopers, Gesundheit, whoops, butterfingers. One remarkable reaction opened my eyes to yet another difference between big winners and little losers. Several years ago, I was doing a project for a client. I had the pleasure of being taken to lunch by the 4 biggest fish in the firm. They wanted to familiarize me with communications problems their company was experiencing. We went to a busy midtown restaurant at peak lunchtime. Every table was filled with a variety of corporate creatures. Upper and middle management types were lunching in their suits and ties or high-collar blouses. workers, and secretaries were munching in their blue shirts or short skirts. The restaurant was buzzing with conversation and conviviality. Over the entree, we were in deep discussion about the company's challenges. The CFO, Mr. Wilson, was talking about the financial outlook when suddenly, blam! Not 6 feet away, a waiter dropped a tray full of dishes. Glasses broke, silverware clattered against the marble floor, and a hot baked potato rolled under our table in a direct path for Wilson's feet. Practically everyone in the restaurant turned toward the humiliated waiter. We heard a cacophony of "uh-oh, butterfingers, whoops, watch it. Boy, that's his last lunch here," and a variety of tittering and derisive laughter. Wilson, however, didn't miss a word of his monologue. Not one big player at my table turned or blinked an eye. It was as though nothing had happened. The restaurant gradually quieted down around us as we continued our deliberations. A few minutes later, the baked potato shot back out from under our table. At that moment, I found myself wondering whether Wilson had been a soccer player in his youth. Over coffee, the director of marketing, Miss Dawson, was discussing the company's planned expansion. Suddenly, she made an expansive gesture with her arms that knocked over her coffee cup. Just as I was about to say, "Oh dear," I bit my tongue. Before I could grab my napkin to help, Dawson was dabbing the muddy puddle with hers and not missing a syllable of her soliloquy. None of her cool colleagues at the table even seemed to notice the overturned cup. At that instant, I realized big boys and girls see no bloopers, hear no bloopers. They never say butterfingers, or whoops, or even uh-oh. They ignore their colleagues' boners. They simply don't notice their comrades' minor spills, slips, fumbles, and blunders. Thus, the technique, see no bloopers, hear no bloopers, was born. Let me suffer in your silence. I have one friend who every time I sneeze says, "Oh, are you coming down with a cold?" Every time I miss a step on a curb, it's "be careful." Every time he sees me after a long day's work, he asks, "Are you tired?" Granted, this is small fry in the great bouillabaisse of bloopers. And the poor guy probably genuinely thinks he's being sensitive to my needs. But darn it, coming down with a cold, missing the curb, and looking tired are less than cool. Let me suffer. In your silence. If you're having dinner with a friend and she makes a boob, be blind to her overturned glass. Be deaf to her sneeze, cough, or hiccups. No matter how well-meaning your Gesundheit, whoops, or knowing smile, nobody likes to be reminded of their own human frailty. Fine, you say, for small slips. But what should one do in extreme circumstances? Say a rippling tide of Coca-Cola is flooding across the table in your direction, and it will be impossible to ignore by the time it reaches your lap. If possible, deftly flip your napkin to obstruct the current and keep talking. Try not to miss a syllable of the sentence you started before the oncoming tide. At this point, your companion might mutter incoherent apologies. Adroitly weave a parenthetical "it's nothing" into your current phrase and continue talking. On such small sands, the castles of big cat camaraderie are built. Technique 78. See no bloopers, hear no bloopers. Cool communicators allow their friends, associates, acquaintances, and loved ones the pleasurable myth of being above commonplace bloopers and embarrassing biological functions. They simply don't notice their comrades' minor spills, slips, fumbles, and faux pas. They obviously ignore raspberries and all other signs of human frailty in their fellow mortals. Big winners never gape at another's gaffes. If people hate to be reminded of the moments when they're not shining, there is another event almost as disillusioning. It is when a talker is shining and the spotlight abruptly pivots to a more urgent matter. The speaker is forgotten in the flurry. Top communicators put the glow back in the gloomy gabber's eyes with the technique that follows. Lend a helping tongue. Now, please get back to your story. In ancient Japan, if you saved someone's life, it was their self-imposed task to spend the rest of their life serving you. Nowadays, if you rescue someone's story, a molecule of that ancient instinct still gushes through his or her veins. It happens all the time. Someone in a group is telling a story, and just before their big point, boom! There's an interruption. Someone new joins the group. A catering person with a tray of crackers and cheese comes over, or a baby starts crying. Suddenly, everyone's attention turns to the new arrival, the nibbles on the tray, or the adorable little tyke. Nobody is aware of the interruption except the speaker. They forget all about the fact that the speaker hasn't made his or her point. Or you're all sitting around the living room and someone is telling a joke. Suddenly, just before their big punchline, little Johnny drops a dish or the phone rings. After they crash, everyone talks about little Johnny's clumsiness. After the call, the subject turns to the impending marriage or medical operation of the caller. Nobody remembers the great punchline got aborted except the joke teller. When it's you regaling everyone at a restaurant, have you ever noticed how you can almost set your clock by the waiter coming to take everyone's order just before your hilarious punchline? Most joke and storytellers are too timid to say after the invasion. Now, as I was saying. Instead, they'll spend the rest of the evening feeling miserable they didn't get to finish. Here's where you come in. Rescue them with the technique I call lend a helping tongue. Watch the gratitude in the storyteller's eyes as he stabilizes where his story sunk, and he sails off again toward the center of attention. His expression and the recognition of your sensitivity by the rest of the group are often reward enough. You are even more fortunate if you can rescue the story of someone who can hire you, promote you, buy from you, or otherwise lift your life. Big winners have elephantine memories. When you do them subtle favors like lend a helping tongue, they find a way to pay you back. Technique 79. Lend a helping tongue. Whenever someone's story is aborted, let the interruption play itself out. Give everyone time to dote on the little darling, give their dinner order, or pick up the jagged pieces of china. Then, when the group reassembles, simply say to the person who suffered story interrupters, "Now please get back to your story." Or better yet, remember where they were, and then ask, "So, what happened after the?" and fill in the last few words. Harvey Mackay, the world's most notable networker, who rose from envelope salesman to corporate CEO and one of America's most sought-after business and motivational speakers, teaches us that the world goes around on favors. How right he is. The next 3 techniques reveal unspoken subtleties of this critical balance of power. Bear the buried with him. Look, here's what's in it for me. Here's what's in it for you, savvy. Business people know everyone is constantly tuned to the same radio station. With him. Whenever anyone says anything, the listener's instinctive reaction is, "What's in it for me?" Sales pros have elevated this constant query to the exalted status of acronym WIFM. They pay such strict attention to the IFM principle that they don't open their pitch with the features of their product or service. Top pros start by highlighting the benefits to the buyer. Except for tactical reasons, during sensitive negotiating, big winners lay both "what's in it for me" and "what's in it for you" right out on the table. This is so critical that If one camouflages Wifm or Wifi, the concealer is relegated to the status of little loser. I once invited a casual acquaintance to lunch. I had hoped to consult with Sam, the head of a marketing association, on my speaking business. I told him my desire and jokingly asked if an hour of his valuable time was available in return for lunch at a great restaurant. That was my way of saying, "Look, Sam, I know there's no real benefit to you except a tasty lunch and the dubious pleasure of my company." In other words, I was revealing Wi-Fi. To make the meeting even more convenient for him, I said, "Sam, choose the date and the best restaurant in your neighborhood." The day of our lunch consultation, lunch rolled around and I traveled 45 minutes across town to his chosen restaurant. As I entered, I was surprised to see an assortment of people arranged around the largest table in the room, with Sam as the smiling centerpiece. Obviously, this was not the setting in which I could consult with him. Unfortunately, Sam had already spotted me by the coat check. I was trapped. It wasn't until after lunch coffee arrived that I realized why Sam had assembled the group. He wanted each to donate presentations on their particular expertise to his organization. The sly fox hadn't revealed his own what's in it for me. Had Sam been a straight shooter and big player, he would have told me on the phone, "Leil, I'm getting a group of speakers who might be helpful to my organization together for a Dutch street lunch. I will, of course, try to answer your questions about your speaking business, but we will be a group of 10. Would you like to join us? Or shall we choose another date when we can have more privacy?" I would gladly have spoken pro bono for Sam's group had he been upfront about it. Instead, by not revealing VIFM, we both lost. I lost a half day, and because of his trickiness, he lost my free speech for his group. Don't deny them the pleasure of helping you big winners. Also lay their cards on the table when asking someone for a favor. Many well-meaning folks are embarrassed to say how important the favor is to them, so they ask as though it's a casual inquiry when it's not. A friend of mine named Stefan once asked me if I knew any bands his organization could hire for their annual event. I told him, "No, I'm sorry, I really don't." But Stefan didn't let it go at that. He pressed, "Leil, didn't you once work with bands on ships?" I told him, "Yes, but I no longer have contact with them." I thought that was the end of it, but Stefan didn't. He grilled me further and I found myself getting confused and irritated. Finally, I said, "Stefan, who's in charge of getting the band?" He sheepishly said, "I am." Kremeniji kids, "Stefan, why didn't you tell me it was your responsibility?" In that case, let me do some research and see if I can find a good one for you. I was happy to do my friend a favor, but Stefan, by not telling me how important it was to him, risked not getting help. He also went down a notch or two in his friend's esteem by not revealing worth. When asking someone for a favor, let them know how much it means to you. You come across as a straight shooter, and the joy of helping you out is often reward enough. Don't deny them that pleasure. Technique 80. Bear the buried, Wifem and Wifi. Whenever you suggest a meeting or ask a favor, divulge the respective benefits. Reveal what's in it for you and what's in it for the other person, even if it's zip. If any hidden agenda comes up later, you get labeled a sly fox. Asking or granting favors is a fabric that holds together only when woven with utmost sensitivity. Let us explore more ways to stitch this delicate cloth so your relationship doesn't rip. Let him savor the favor. Let the sun set and rise again. Before you make your move, Susan Evans, one of my clients, heads up a large real estate firm. Once, sitting in her office discussing an upcoming project, Her secretary buzzed. "Excuse me, Miss Evans, it's your brother in law Harry on the phone." "Oh, of course," she smiled. "Put him on." My client, making apologies for the interruption, picked up the phone. I left the room for a few moments to give her privacy. When I returned, Susan was just hanging up, saying, "Sure, have him phone me." She told me the call was from her brother in law, whose young cousin worked in a gas station but was interested in the career in real estate. "The young man is going to call me and I'll see if I can help him out." It was obvious she was happy to do her brother in law a favor. We picked up our discussion where we left off. Not 4 minutes later, the secretary buzzed again. "Miss Evans, a Sunny Laker's on the line. He says he's your brother in law, Harry's cousin, and he's supposed to call you." My client was taken aback. I could tell from her expression she was saying to herself, "Boy, my over-anxious brother-in-law didn't waste any time, did he?" It seemed obvious to both of us what had happened. Like greased lightning, Harry must have hot-breathedly called Cousin Sunny to give him the big headline, "Evans would see him." Then, by dialing Miss Evans immediately, Sunny made it seem the big deal interview was the most important event in his otherwise dull and dismal life. True or not, one verity remained. Little cousin was insensitive to an unspoken rule big winners always obey. Don't jump immediately when someone is doing you a favor. Allow the person granting the favor time to savor the pleasure of agreeing to it before having to pay up. Both brother-in-law and potential employee slipped in Evans's estimate, and all because of timing. To ensure the kid wouldn't call his real estate mogul sister-in-law too quickly, Harry should have waited a day before telling his cousin the good news. Also, young Sunny should have asked cousin Harry about Evan's schedule. Sometimes an immediate call is advantageous, but not when someone is granting you a favor. Technique 81. Let him savor the favor. Whenever a friend agrees to a favor, allow your generous buddy time to relish the joy of his or her beneficence before you make them pay the piper. How long? At least 24 hours. One might think Evans was unfair judging Sunny harshly, just because he didn't let her savor the favor. It runs deeper than that. Evans's subconscious thought process goes something like this. If this kid is insensitive to the subtleties of timing when getting a job, how sensitive is he going to be when negotiating the sale of a house? One agent's over-anxious call to an owner can mean thousands lost in commissions for the firm. Big winners have supernatural vision into your future. They see every communications blunder you make as a visible blotch on your X-ray. It dims your prognosis for being successful in life. Let's look at yet another tenuous thread between favor asker and favor grantor that must not be severed lest the relationship unravel. Tit for wait, tat. I did it just because I like you. I once asked a well-connected friend who works in a top Los Angeles talent agency if she knew any celebrities I could contact for a project I was working on. Tanya flipped through her Rolodex and came up with just the names I needed. It was obvious to both of us I owed her big time. When I thanked her profusely on the phone, Tanya said, "Oh, I'm sure you'll find a way to pay me back." "Well, of course I will," I said. "That goes without saying." And well, it should have gone without saying. She was reminding me the favor wasn't out of friendship, but because she expected something in return. 2 days later, Tanya called and said she was coming to New York in a few months. She was just checking now if I could put her up then. Naturally, I could, but blatantly cashing in on the return favor so quickly was not a smooth move. When someone does something nice for you, you find yourself with an elephant's memory. In fact, you consciously look for ways to return the favor. Had Tanya called, even years later, of course, I would have remembered I owed her one. Frankly, I was glad it came up so quickly, so I could even the score. Nevertheless, I do wish the whole barter aspect had been left unspoken. It tarnished what should have been a generous sharing on both sides. Tarnish always wears off on the tarnisher. When you do someone a favor and they obviously owe you one, wait a few weeks. Don't make it look like tit for tat. Allow the favor asker the pleasurable myth that you joyfully did the favor with no thought of what you're going to get in return. They know that's not true. You know that's not true. But only little losers make it obvious. Technique 82. Tit for wait, tat. When people do you favors and it's obvious they owe you one. Wait a suitable amount of time before asking them to pay. Let them enjoy the fact or fiction that you did it out of friendship. Don't call in your tit for the tat too swiftly. The next three techniques also involve timing, not of favors, but of important discussions. Parties are for prater, the first of three safe havens. When police were hot on the tail of a thief in ancient times, he'd frantically seek a church to duck into. The crook knew if he could get to an altar, the frustrated posse could not arrest him until he came out. When a pack of wolves in the jungle is in hot pursuit of a jackrabbit, the frightened bunny's eyes seek a hollow log. He knows the wolves can't devour him until he emerges. Likewise, in the human jungle, big cats have certain safe havens. Although unspoken, they are as secure as the 10th century altar or a hole in the log. There are clearly understood times and places where even the toughest tiger knows he must not attack. I have a friend, Kirsten, the president of an advertising agency, who each year invites me to her company's Christmas party. One year, the holiday spirit was in extra high swing. Conviviality was high and champagne flowed freely. It was a terrific bash. The evening wore on, more bubbly flowed, and the decibel level of the holiday revelers went up and up. So high, in fact, that Kirsten told me she was going to tiptoe out the back door and offered to drop me off at my place. As we were making our way toward the exit, we heard a woozy voice in the crowd. "Oh, Kirsten, Kirsten!" A mailroom worker, warped with too much seasonal spirit, wobbled up to her boss and said, "You know, this is a great party, a great party. But I've been doing some figuring. If half what it cost went into a childcare facility for the seven mothers with preschool children who work here." Kirsten, a top communicator, took Jane's hands in hers and gave her a big smile. She said, "Jane, you're obviously excellent at maths. You're right. Just about half of what this party cost would indeed pay for the opening of such a facility. Let's talk about it during business hours." We then made a swift departure. On the way back to my place, she let out a big breath and said, "Phew, I'm glad that's over." "Didn't you enjoy the party, Kirsten?" I asked. "Well, sure," she said, "but you never know what's going to happen. For instance," she said, that remark Jane made. She went on to explain management had already had several meetings about opening a child care facility for employees. In fact, plans for turning an unused storage area into a beautiful nursery were already in the works. Naively, I asked Kirsten why she hadn't mentioned that to Jane. It wasn't the right time or place. Kirsten had handled the situation at the party the way any big winner would. No spoken confrontation now, but probable, silent condemnation later. Jane, unfortunately, had broken the first unspoken safe haven rule: parties are for prater. Did Kirsten chastise Jane? Did she punish her inappropriate behavior? Not then, of course. Nevertheless, Jane would probably feel the repercussions a few months down the pike when it came to promotion time. But by then, poor Jane wouldn't even know why she was passed over. Will it be because of a one time over imbibing? Jane might grumble, yes, Jane is wrong. It's simply that big players can't take the chance that one of their key people will feel too much holiday spirit at another party and next time confront an important client. Technique 83. Parties are for prater. There are three sacred, safe havens in the human jungle, where even the toughest tiger knows he must not attack. The first of these is parties. Parties are for pleasantries and good fellowship, not for confrontations. Big players, even when standing next to their enemies at the buffet table, smile and nod. They leave tough talk for tougher settings. Let's move to the second safe haven, where big cats can escape the claws of bigger cats, and they hope the growls of lesser ones. Dinners for dining. Tough negotiating can kill your appetite. Did you ever wonder why business lunches between big bosses go on interminably long, sometimes well into the afternoon? Did you ever suspect it's just because they like to sit, drink, and massage each other on the company expense account? Perhaps there's an element of that, but the main reason is because the dining table is an even more sacred safe haven than a party. Big boys and girls realize whether it's a business dinner, lunch, or breakfast. Breaking bread together is a time when they must discuss no unpleasant aspects of the business. Let's listen in on an average business lunch between big players. We hear the clanking of glasses as they consume drinks over convivial conversation. They are discussing golf, the weather, and making general observations about the state of the business. During the main course, the discourse turns to food, the arts, current affairs, and other non-threatening subjects. Wasted time, one might ask. Not at all. The big players are watching each other's moves very carefully, calculating each other's skills, knowledge, prowess. Like NFL scouts observing college football practice, they're determining who's got the right stuff. Big players know how people handle themselves at a social occasion is an accurate barometer of their big business muscle. As they are smiling and laughing at each other's jokes, they are all making silent, critical judgments. Finally, coffee arrives. At this point, one or more of the biggies gently broaches the business at hand. Naturally, he or she does it with supposed reluctance, trying to repress the obvious relief that at last they can get down to significant stuff. He exudes, "What a shame such genial company should have to concern itself with mundane matters like making money." Only after they have played out this crucial charade can they discuss business. But no dirty business. The biggies can brainstorm over coffee. They can discuss proposals over dessert. They can toss around new ideas over cordials. They can explore the positive side of the merger, the acquisition, or the partnership while waiting for the check. However, should any disagreement, misunderstanding, or controversial aspect arise, they must immediately relegate it to another table, the conference table. Technique 84. Dinners for dining. The most guarded, safe haven respected by big winners is the dining table. Breaking bread together is a time when they bring up no unpleasant matters. While eating, they know it's okay to brainstorm and discuss the positive side of the business. Their dreams, their desires, their designs. They can free associate and come up with new ideas. But no tough business. This convention probably arose out of a prudent agreement not to inflict indigestion on each other. Tough negotiating is unpalatable and can ruin an otherwise perfectly mouth-watering veal chop. Incidentally, the same rule applies in the social jungle. If one partner in a friendship or a love relationship has some heavy relationship issues to discuss, save them for after dessert. Even if you don't solve the problem, you want to enjoy the delicious chocolate souffle. Let's crawl into our third and final safe haven to explore it. Chance encounters are for chit chat. Aha, I've got you now. William, who sells widgets, has been trying to get Big Winner on the phone for weeks to see if BW's company will buy his line of widgets. Big Winner is still considering Willie's widgets and plans eventually to return his call. However, at this point in our story, our little hero's phone has not rung. It just so happens, one evening, Willie finds himself standing behind Big Winner in the supermarket line. What good fortune, thinks Willie. Oh hell, thinks Big Winner. I hope he's not going to hit me with talk of his widgets at this hour. Those who appreciate safe havens know there are two very different endings to this story. The Willie who brings up widgets, with an aha, I've got you now, gleam in his eye, never gets his call returned. Even if Big Winner preferred Willie's widgets above all others, he would find the supermarket entrapment sufficiently painful to punish the little loser. However, the Willie who just says, hello there, BW, how good to see you, with nary a word of widgets, shows he's a big player too. This Willie will most certainly get his call returned, probably the next day. Out of Big Winner's relief and gratitude for Willie's graciousness. Technique 85. Chance encounters are for chit-chat. If you're selling, negotiating, or in any sensitive communication with someone, do not capitalize on a chance meeting. Keep the melody of your mistaken meeting sweet and light. Otherwise, it could turn into your swan song with big player. Consistently create safe havens for people if you want them to elevate you to the status of Big Winner. You may find yourself dining with them, going to parties with them, getting big hellos in the hall, and closing deals much faster than during business hours. Who knows? If it's your desire, you even make yourself eligible for some heavy socializing at the top. Big winners make it safe for each other to accept invitations to play golf, spend their weekend in their country homes, or relax by each other's pools. They know there will be no sharks swimming in the water, no razor blades buried in the shrimp cocktail. Empty their tanks. Tell me about your cracked skull later. What's your insurance number? Once night, several years ago, on a New York City street, I caught a man trying to break into a car. I shouted for him to stop. Instead of being content with escaping, the burly would-be burglar decided to retaliate. As he raced past me, he shoved me down onto the cement and I cracked my skull against the curb. Dizzily, I wobbled into the emergency room of a nearby hospital. Holding an ice pack against my throbbing head, I was grilled by the emergency room triage nurse on my address, telephone, and social security numbers, insurance carrier, policy number, ad nauseum. Don't bother me with that minutia. All I wanted to do was tell somebody, anybody, what happened to me. It wasn't until the very end of her ruthless and sadistic interrogation that she asked, "So what happened?" I later told my sad story to a friend, Sue, a nurse who works in admitting in another emergency room. She said, "I know. I can't believe they print the forms that way. Injured people don't get to tell what happened to them until the last line of the form." Sue said getting crucial numerical details from people suffering in the A and E with broken bones and burns was a real challenge. Until she said she switched her questioning around. She'd first ask them what happened. They'd tell her all about it. She'd listen sympathetically. Then, she said, they were only too happy to give me the information I needed. Good bosses understand this human need to talk. Robert, a colleague of mine who owns a small manufacturing firm, says whenever one of his employees complains about a problem, he never holds the griper's feet to the fire for facts first. He hears the employee out completely. He lets him carry on about the cantankerous customer, the uncooperative co-worker. Then after he's gotten it off his chest, Robert says, I get the facts a lot more clearly. When you have important information to impart, any kid working in a garage knows you can't pump more gas into a full tank, too much topping it off, and it splashes onto the cement. Likewise, your listener's brain is always full of his or her own thoughts, worries, and enthusiasms. If you pump your ideas into your listener's brain, which is full of her own notions, you'll get a polluted mixture, then a spill. If you want your super supreme ideas to flow into her tank unpolluted, drain her tank completely first. Whenever you are discussing emotionally charged matters, let the speaker finish completely before you jump in. Count to 10 if you must. It will seem like an eternity, but letting the flustered fellow finish is the only way he'll hear you when it's your turn. Technique 86. Empty their tanks. If you need information, let people have their entire say first. Wait patiently until their needle is on empty and the last drop drips out and splashes on the cement. It's the only way to be sure their tank is empty enough of their own inner noise to start receiving your ideas. I'm going to make you miserable before you can enjoy being my customer. Companies that run mail order operations could take a hint from this technique. One reason I enjoy ordering from LL Bean, a mail order clothing and sports equipment outfit, is they let me ask questions about the variable or widget I want first. They let me ramble on with my questions about the quality, the available colors, how it looks, how it feels, how it smells, and how it works. Then, when I'm all whacked up about receiving my 4 size 10 red and chartreuse, soft, odorless widgets, they tastefully ask my credit card number. Other companies have first grilled me on the number, the expiration date, my customer number, which I can never find on the back of the catalog, and how often I've ordered from them in the past before I even get to fantasize about the wonderful widget I might want to buy from them. Takes all the joy out of the purchase and sometimes kills the sale. Top communicators do more than just let you babble on. They use the next technique while you're in the process of dribbling down. Echo the emo, hear the facts, but smear the emo is a word invented by Helen Gurley Brown, the grand dame of Cosmopolitan magazine. Emo translated is give more emotion. Once Cosmopolitan asked me to write an article on communicating sensitive matters, most specifically advising young women on how to make their boyfriends more passionate. I interviewed a number of psychologists, communications experts, and sexologists. My draft came back from Cosmo, all marked up with more emo, scribbled on every page. I called my editor and asked what it meant. She said that was Helen's way of saying, downplay all that factual stuff with the sex therapists and so-called experts. Write about the emotion the young woman feels when her boyfriend isn't passionate enough, the emotion the accused male feels when confronted, and the emotion the couple feels about discussing their quandary. Helen Gurley Brown, a certified big winner, liked to have it all and knew just how to get it. Helen recognized, when the time is right, reject the rational and empathize with the emotions. In other words, smear on the emo. Oh no, he must have been mortified. LL Bean recently smeared emo all over me. Several months ago, my friend Phil wanted to buy some trousers and asked for a recommendation. I dragged him to my closet to show him the quality and construction of the LL Bean clothes. That convinced him, and Phil ordered a pair of navy blue dress trousers. Phil wore his brand new LL Bean trousers for the first time on a big date with a new girlfriend at an elegant restaurant. While following the maitre d' to the cozy corner booth which he'd requested, his date happened to drop her evening bag. Phil promptly bent over to pick it up. Right down the middle seam. Most of the diners, facing Phil's derriere, mercifully looked away. A few tittered. Phil, tugging the torn seams together to blanket his buns, backed his way into the booth. The cool upholstery on his bottom the rest of the evening reminded him of his humiliation. When I heard of Phil's tribulations, I was furious at LL Bean. I immediately called one of their customer service agents. She sympathized as I told her of Phil's ordeal, but I was still simmering. She patiently listened and even asked me details of the disaster. When I finished the long, sad story, the agent said, "Oh, that's terrible. I understand. Your friend must have felt awful." "Yes, he did," I agreed. "He must have been mortified," she said. "He definitely was," I said, surprised at her excellent grasp of the situation. "And you, when you heard about it, you must have felt terrible too, especially after you'd recommended our products so highly." "Well, your products usually are excellent," I said, calming down a bit. "I'm so sorry we caused you this pain and aggravation," she said. "Oh," I interrupted, "it's not your fault." Now I was completely appeased. It must have just been a fluke that this one pair of trousers was. Technique 87. Echo the EMO. Facts speak. Emotions shout. Whenever you need facts from people about an emotional situation, let them emote. Hear their facts but empathize like mad with their emotions. Smearing on the EMO is often the only way to calm their emotional storm. There's more to this story, but let me pause here to interject the echo the emo technique. The clever customer service rep not only emptied my tanks and softened me up with echo the emo, she completely dissolved me with the next technique. My goof, your gain. Make 'em happy you messed up. The next day, UPS delivered not only the replacement slacks, but tucked into the package was a handwritten apology and a hefty gift certificate. Would I order from that company again? You bet I would. Would I recommend their clothes to someone else? You bet I would. Top customer service folks welcome mistakes because they know it gives their firm a chance to shine. Whenever you mess up and someone suffers because of it, make sure they come out ahead, way ahead. I call the technique my goof, your gain. Visiting an important client's office, I once tripped on a rug and took a nosedive, making a 3-point landing in a vase on her desk. My nose was spared, but her vase shattered into smithereens. 2 tubes of crazy glue and lots of "where the heck does this piece go" later, the vase was back on her desk, and we agreed it looked pretty good. Nevertheless, the next day I had a messenger deliver a beautiful vase, 10 times the value of the almost totaled one, with a dozen roses in it. Whenever we speak, my client tells me every time she looks at the new vase, she smiles. A better incentive gift than a pen with your name on it, no? The next time I visit her office, my client may hide some of her more valuable breakables. But thanks to my goof, your gain, there will be a next time. Technique 88. My goof, your gain. Whenever you make a mistake, make sure your victim benefits. It's not enough to correct your error. Ask yourself, what could I do for this suffering soul so he or she will be delighted? I made the flub, then do it. Fast. In that way, your goof will become your gain. Now suppose it's not your boo-boo, it's theirs. How can you make their goof your gain? Read on. Leave an escape hatch. A genteel way to say freeze. Punk, while I frisk you in Japan. Some citizens prefer to lose their lives than to lose face. In America, the same death wish exists, with one modification. The young dreams of the death of the mortal who made him lose face. Why make enemies? Unless it is your obligation to catch cheaters or entrap liars, let them get away with it. Then immediately get them out of your life and the lives you're responsible for. Even when the case is open and shut against someone, when you've got the ratfing trapped, leave him an escape hatch. The best example I heard of this high sensitivity was from one of my clients. She was invited to brunch at the home of a wealthy socialite known as Lady Stephanie. Lady Stephanie's home was filled with beautiful objets d'art. Not the least among them was an exquisite collection of extremely valuable Fabergé eggs, which all the guests admired. At the end of the elegant champagne brunch, my client told me she was walking out the door, chatting with several other guests. Just then, Lady Stephanie sidled up to one woman leaving at the same time as my client. "Oh, I'm so happy you were admiring my Fabergé collection," Lady Stephanie said, sliding her hand into the pocket of the guest's mink coat and plucking out one of her priceless eggs. "You must have wanted to see this one in the sunlight. Come, let us look at it together. It does reflect the bright light beautifully." The mink-clad thief gulped and furtively looked around to see who had witnessed her gentle entrapment. My client and everyone in the foyer saw what happened, but took Lady Stephanie's lead and pretended naivete of the attempted heist. Carrying the charade a step further, Lady Stephanie and the sticky-fingered guest admired the egg in the sunlight. Then Lady Stephanie, with her Fabergé egg secured safely between her perfectly manicured fingers, marched home to put the treasure in its rightful place. The attempted egg snatcher crawled back to her car from her last attendance at Lady Stephanie's coveted bashes. The hostess let the foiled filcher get away with the few slivered shreds of her ego left intact. Why did Lady Stephanie come out ahead? Everyone who witnessed and subsequently heard about the thwarted burglary has renewed respect for Lady Stephanie. Snaring the thief, yet sparing her pride, helped Lady Stephanie keep her reputation of hostess with the mostest. Why do big winners let bad news people get away with bummers? Because, like mothers, confronting naughty children to correct them, confronting creeps is a way of saying I care. By closing your mouth and then the door forever, you are saying, "You are so beneath me, I'm not going to even waste my words on you. Waste my mea culpa." Big winners leave an escape hatch for the small foibles of friends they wish to keep by taking the blame themselves. If a friend gets lost and is an hour late arriving at your house, tell her those directions I gave you were terrible. He breaks your Limoges bowl. "Oh, I shouldn't have left it in such a precarious position." It's the old mea culpa routine that endears you to everyone, especially when they realize it wasn't your fault. Technique 89. Leave an escape hatch. Whenever you catch someone lying, filching, exaggerating, distorting, or deceiving, don't confront the dirty duck directly, unless it is your responsibility to catch or correct the culprit, or unless you are saving other innocent victims by doing so. Let the transgressor out of your trap with his tricky pose in one piece. Then resolve never to gaze upon it again. Residents of Toronto, Canada have a well-earned reputation for grace. They demonstrated it last year in a downtown Toronto drugstore. A shopper attempted to stroll out through the security system with a purloined object in his pocket. Instead of a shrill alarm shattering all shoppers' eardrums, as in many American cities, a tasteful little chime sounded. A charming voice came across the public address. "Excuse us, we have failed to inactivate the inventory control system. Thank you for your patience while you wait for a customer care representative to come help you. Isn't that a nicer way of saying freeze, punk, while we come frisk you? Now let's move on to the next technique to keep people from messing up and to help them give you their very best. Buttercups for their boss. You're great. What's your boss's name? A complimentary letter is called a buttercup because it butters up the recipient. Buttercups are nice. Even nicer are buttercups about someone to their boss. I once needed a massive photocopying job. It was so immense that the assistant manager of Staples' office supply store didn't think it could be finished by the end of the week. Nevertheless, grudgingly, he grumbled, "I'll try." In my enthusiasm and hope he could, I gushed, "Wow, you're great. What's your boss's name? Your supervisor should get a letter of congratulations on hiring you. You really try harder for your customers." To my astonishment, not only was my printing job done 2 days early, but every time I walk into Staples, the assistant manager rolls out the red carpet. I began to think, I may be onto something. A premature letter of commendation for favors not yet received could be a clever tactic. I decided to check it out with a few heavy hitters on my consultation list. One fellow I know, Tim, a top travel agent, is a real can-do guy. He gets anything his friends ask for in a finger snap. He's the fellow to call when you want hard-to-get theatre tickets. He's the guy you call when your airline says the hotel is booked or the flight is oversold. When I told him of my buttercup experience, Tim laughed and said, "Leil, of course. This is news to you. A complimentary letter to someone's boss or the promise of one is a great insurance policy. It's as good as a written rider that you will be well taken care of in the future." Now I have a standard one in my computer. The buttercup reads as follows: "Dear, name of supervisor, I know how important customer service is to an organization such as yours. This letter is to commend, name of employee. He/she is an example of an employee title who gives exceptional customer service, name of store or business, continues to have my business, thanks in great part to the service given by name of employee. Gratefully, signature, I've sent this letter to supervisors of parking lots, owners of insurance companies, and to managers of dozens of stores where I shop regularly. I'm sure that's why I never need to worry about getting a parking place when the lot is full. An immediate callback from my insurance agent, and attentive service at my regular shopping haunts. But be careful. Don't just ask, 'What's the name of your supervisor?' Hearing those words can make an employee as nervous as a turkey in November. Be sure to couch it in a compliment. Say something like, 'Wow, you are terrific. What's your supervisor's name? I'd like to write him or her a letter.' Then write it. You'll forever be a VIP in their book." The next technique tells you how to stand out as a VIP when you're in a group. Technique 90. Buttercups for their boss. Do you have a store clerk, accountant, law firm, junior partner, tailor, auto mechanic, maitre d', massage therapist, kids teacher, or any other worker you want special attention from in the future? The surefire way to make them care enough to give you their very best is send a buttercup to their boss. Lead the listeners. How to tell a leader from a follower during the McCarthy era in the US. Government spies infiltrated underground political rallies to determine who was dangerous to national security. The agents were trained applause watchers. They photographed and investigated men who clapped first, shouted bravo the loudest, and smiled the longest at the end of politically inflammatory speeches. The spies dubbed those the dangerous ones. The infiltrators felt first responders were confident cats who had the power to persuade followers, and the charisma to lead crowds. In less politically sensitive gatherings, the same principle applies. People who respond first to a presentation or happening without looking around to see how everyone else is reacting are men and women of leadership caliber. Cool cats clap first. You are sitting in an auditorium with hundreds of fellow employees listening to the president of your firm introduce a new concept. As you're slouching anonymously in the audience, you think your expression is invisible to the man or woman at the podium. Not so. As a speaker, I guarantee you, every one of my colleagues sees every smile, every frown, every light in every eye, and every emblem of extraordinary human intelligence flashing back at him or her. Likewise, the company president, making a presentation, anxiously surveys his corporate jungle and, from the passes peering back at him, senses which employees are sympathetic and which are not. He also knows which in the sea of faces floating in front of him has the potential to be a heavy hitter, like himself. How? Because heavy hitters, even when they do not agree with the speaker, support the podium pontificator. Why? Because they know what it's like to be on. They know no matter how big or little the cat at the front of the room is, when giving a speech, he's concerned about the crowd's acceptance. When the company big shot delivers his last line, carefully contrived to bring the crowd to its feet or employees to acquiescence, do you think he is unaware of who starts the trickle or the riptide of acceptance? No way. Though his head is down, while taking a bow, with the insight of McCarthy-era spy, he perceives precisely who inaugurated the applause, precisely how long after the last words were uttered, and precisely how enthusiastically. Being the first to put your hands together, being the first to jump to your feet, and if appropriate, being the first to shout bravo, gets you big cat status with the tiger who was talking. Be the first clapper, no matter how small the crowd, no matter how informal the talk. Don't wait to see how everyone else is going to respond. Even if it's a small group of 3 or 4 people standing around, be the first to empathize with the speaker's ideas, the first to mutter good idea. It's proof positive you're a person who trusts his or her own instincts. Technique 91. Lead the listeners. No matter how prominent the big cat behind the podium is, crouched inside is a little scaredy cat who is anxious about the crowd's acceptance. Big winners recognize you're a fellow big winner when they see you leading their listeners in a positive reaction. Be the first to applaud or publicly commend the man or woman you agree with or want favors from. The great scorecard in the sky. Bottom dog bows lower, barks softer, any minute, any second. Football fans know the score. Even beer guzzling Big George, dozing in front of the TV set on Football Sunday knows. Poke his pudgy pot, and in a wink, he'll tell you who's winning, who's losing, and by precisely how many points. Key players in the game of life are like George. Even when you think they're dozing, they are constantly aware of the score between themselves and everyone in their life, friends and family included. They know who is winning, who is losing, and by how many points. When 2 Japanese businessmen meet, it's obvious who is on top. You measure it in millimeters from how close to the floor their noses come when bowing. Bottom man's nose dives lower. In America, we don't have carefully choreographed bows showing the score in a relationship, but boys and girls in the business, big league, know who is top dog and who is bottom dog today. It can change tomorrow. Bottom dog must curtsy deeper. He or she must show deference. Bottom dog must offer to meet at top dog's office, pick up the restaurant tab when appropriate, and be respectful of top dog's time. If bottom dog fails to show the proper deference, He doesn't get his nose rubbed into the ground. He simply disqualifies himself to bark in the big league. That's what happened to my girlfriend Laura, who had developed the healthy milkshake. Remember her from Instant Replay? When we last left Laura, she was blowing her chances with Fred, the top banana of a supermarket chain, by grilling him for details of his mailing address, complaining her pen was out of ink, making him wait while she got another, writing numbers down wrong ad nauseum. I didn't tell you the worst part. After Fred was generous enough to invite Laura to send him samples of her health shake, she dropped another bomb by asking him which shipping service she should use. He must have said FedEx because I heard Laura say, "Well, my milkshake needs to stay refrigerated. Does FedEx have refrigerated trucks?" At this point, I knew she had strangled the deal by her own phone cord. She shouldn't nudge supermarket czar with dinky shipping details. In fact, Laura should be so grateful. She should personally deliver the drink the next day, rolling it all the way to his supermarket with her nose if need be. Laura was obviously not aware of the great scorecard in the sky. That day, the tally was Fred everything, Laura nothing. Big winners. Before putting pen to paper, fingers to keyboard, mouth to phone, or hand to someone else's to shake it, do a quick calculation. They ask themselves who has the most to benefit from this relationship. What has each of us done recently that demands deference from the other? And what can I do to even the score? Friends, keep tabs too. The great scorecard in the sky is not just bobbing over business people. If family members and friends look carefully over their loved ones' heads, they'll spot it. And, like an over-the-counter stock, it goes up or down every day. When you mess up, you have to even your score by doing more for the one who didn't. To keep love alive, keep your eye on the great scorecard in the sky. Several months ago, I met a nice chap named Charles at a convention. We started discussing our favorite foods. His was homemade linguine with pesto sauce. I like Charles, and I make a mean pesto sauce. The remarkable coincidence of these two elements emboldened me to invite him to dinner at my place. "Great," he said. We set it for 7:30 the following Tuesday. Tuesday afternoon, I begin preparations for the big date. The cuckoo clock on the wall monitored my progress. At 5 cuckoos, I run to the store to find pine nuts. By 6 cuckoos, I'm back home grinding basil and garlic. At 7 cuckoos, I'm folding napkins, setting the table, pulling out fresh candles. Whoops, running late. I change clothes and spruce myself up. When 7:30 strikes, I am all ready. The pesto and I wait his arrival. 8 o'clock rolls around and no friend. Well, I figure, I'll open the wine and let it breathe. Another hour passes and no Charles. The cuckoo calls me cuckoo 9 times now. I begin to believe the bird. It is evident Charles isn't coming. I have been stood up. The next day, Charles called with half-hearted apologies and a semi-plausible excuse. His car broke down. "Gee, I'm sorry," I said. "I wanted to say, did Martians capture you? Were you transported to another planet where there were no phones to call me?" I resisted the sarcasm. However, he did sound contrite, so I was almost willing to forget it. Until his next question, he obviously wasn't aware of how he'd slipped in the great scorecard in the sky because instead of inviting me for linguine with pesto at a fine Italian restaurant to make up for his blooper, he asked, "When can we reschedule at your house?" Never, Charlie. Technique. 92. The great scorecard in the sky. Any two people have an invisible scorecard hovering above their heads. The numbers continually fluctuate, but one rule remains. Player with lower score pays deference to player with higher score. The penalty for Not keeping your eye on the great scorecard in the sky is to be thrown out of the game permanently. A final word: your destiny. We've met many people in How to Talk to Anyone. A few of their names are changed, but each is very real. Recently, I decided to track down some of the folks with whom I'd crossed paths over the years. I wanted to see what they're up to now. Laura, my old friend who dreamed of milkshake millions but ignored the supermarket czar's scorecard, is now back at her day job. Sam, who ruffled me by not revealing he wanted me to speak for his organization, no longer has one. Sunny, who hounded his brother in law's cousin by a too quick call, is still pumping gas. Tanya, who insisted on immediate tit for tat, no longer has that terrific job at the talent agency. Poor Jane, the mailroom clerk, who confronted her boss at the Christmas party 5 years ago, is still wrapping packages. And Dan, who left the prolonged inspirational message on his phone, now has an unlisted number, not a good sign for an aspiring speaker. Whereas Barry, who asks everyone he calls, "What color is your time?" was recently chosen Broadcaster of the Year by the National Association of Talk Show Hosts. Joe, who keeps note of everyone on his business card dossier, is now a state senator. Jimmy, the expert at eyeball selling, was recently written up in Success magazine. Steve, whose staff insinuates, "Oh wow, it's you," to every caller, is one of the most requested speakers on the cable circuit. Tim, the can-do guy who gets what he wants from workers in every industry by writing buttercups for their boss, now owns the travel agency. And Gloria, my hairdresser who gives the great nutshell resume, recently opened a salon on New York's fashionable Fifth Avenue. Does this mean to say that just because the first folks irked me and a few others, they were exiled to a humdrum existence, and the latter group, who made people smile, would attain great heights? Of course not. Those isolated moments of their lives we examined were but one move of many they made each day. But consider, if you'd been the one who was ruffled by Laura, Sam, Sunny, Tanya, Jane, or Dan, and they called you, would you feel like extending yourself for them? Probably not. The memory of their ragged dealing would still smart. Whereas if you heard from Barry, Joe, Jimmy, Steve, Tim, or Gloria, happy memories of your exchange would flood over you. You'd want to do whatever you could for them. Multiply your response by many thousands. As we said in the introduction, nobody gets to the top alone. Over the years, the smooth moves of these big winners have captured the hearts and conquered the minds of hundreds of people who helped boost them rung by rung to the top of whatever ladder they chose. How does one become an instinctive smooth mover rather than a ragged rider through life? The answer became blindingly clear one snowy day last winter. Lumbering along a neatly groomed track on cross-country skis, I spotted a Nordic skier swiftly striding toward me in the same trail. I didn't need to observe his high kick or his snazzy diagonal poling to let me know I was obstructing the path of a pro. While mustering the energy to lug my throbbing legs out of the track so super skier could soar past, he deftly sidestepped out of the groove, leaving the groomed trail all for me. As he whizzed toward me, he slowed slightly, smiled, nodded, and said, "Good morning, beautiful day for skiing, isn't it?" I appreciated his deference and insinuation that we were equals on the snow. I knew he was not thinking, "Hey, look at me, here I am." But, there you are, let me make room for you. As I implied in the opening words of this book, the difference in the life success between those two types of thinkers is incalculable. Why was Super Skier able to pull off his moves so gracefully? Was he born with this skill? No. His was a deliberate move that grew out of practice. Practice is also the fountainhead of all smooth communications moves, excellence is not a single and solitary action. It is the outcome of many years of making small, smooth moves, tiny ones, like the 92 little tricks we've explored in How to Talk to Anyone. These moves create your destiny. Remember, repeating an action makes a habit. Your habits create your character, and your character is your destiny. May success be your destiny. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you found this series informative and inspiring. Now, go out there and start making meaningful connections. Happy communicating.